Good morning, and thank you all for coming. Today, on behalf of BC's 41,000 teachers, I have an important announcement to make. But first, a short history lesson on how we got here. For over a year, BC teachers have been at the bargaining table. We've met with the BC Public School Employers Association more than 40 times, trying to reach a fair and reasonable deal. The BCTF has been working towards a deal that respects the work that teachers do in our schools every day, and a deal that would provide better support for our students. For many months, I was hopeful. We started talks last February with a new framework agreement negotiated between BCTF and BCPC. That agreement set timelines for bargaining, brought a facilitator, Mark Brown, to the table, and created a respectful process. Soon after, Christy Clark released her white paper on a 10-year term. And then 5 months into the negotiating process, Premier Clark and Minister Fassbender dismissed the Public School Employers Association board and appointed a new director and negotiator. For 5 full months, despite everything the Premier was saying in the media, the only term tabled by the employer was for 2 years. The BCTF had tabled a 3-year term. We decided to ask teachers what they thought about a 10-year deal. In a province-wide vote last June, teachers rejected Premier Clark's scheme by 96%. Teachers, given the last 12 years, know better than to lock ourselves into another decade of the same. Up until this point, the 10-year scheme was only a media soundbite. But that changed since the parties returning to the negotiation table in the fall following the BC Supreme Court hearing. Peter Cameron, the government, and BCPC's appointee finally tabled the 10-year term, the very thing that we had soundly rejected in June. But that was just the beginning. Since the fall, Christy Clark's government, through their appointed leaders at BCPC, is again trying to strip teachers' working conditions and freeze wages. They propose nothing that teachers can agree to, not a single incentive for any deal, never mind a longer-term deal. Every meeting we've had since December has seen the parties driven further and further apart as the government goes after unreasonable concessions. Bargaining is about moving forward, not backwards. With new players at the table and a workable framework agreement in place, there was hope we could move on from the last round of bargaining. BC teachers have worked hard this round to give parties the breathing room to get a deal, to negotiate fairly and with respect. But that hope has turned into some frustration. For months now, behind closed doors, this government has been unreasonable, unfair, and provocative. They are doing it all over again. Christy Clark, Peter Fassbender, and the lead negotiator are acting like a historic court win never happened. The BC Liberal government broke the law, the Charter of Rights, twice. They were shown to be acting in bad faith and deliberately trying to provoke a full-scale strike. When Christy Clark stripped our collective agreement, it allowed the government to underfund our public education system to the tune of $275 million per year since 2002. As a result, we have lost 3,500 teachers, including 1,400 specialist teachers, counselors, teacher librarians, English language learning teachers, special education teachers, learning resource teachers, and learning assistance teachers. And now today, BC has the worst student-educator ratio in the country. British Columbia has over 16,000 classes with 4 or more children with special needs, 3,800 with 7 or more. We have students learning in unsafe and overcrowded shop and tech ed classes where kids are at risk of injury. All of that is because this government stripped our collective agreements. And now BC funds education $1,000 less per student than the Canadian average, and with no increase slated for 2014. All of the underfunding and all of the kids have led to an entire generation of BC kids being shortchanged. What we've seen at the bargaining table is a government intent on keeping it that way. Not only is the government appealing the BC Supreme Court ruling, they are trying to take back what teachers just won. At one of the first sessions back after the BC Supreme Court decision came down, BCPC tabled a proposal that would eliminate all the language that teachers have fought 12 years to get back. It showed total disrespect for the law, for teachers, and for our students. Sadly, this government has not learned anything. It's as if Justice Griffin's ruling never happened. Their proposal to eliminate class size, class composition, and staffing levels would, and I quote, supersede and replace all previous articles that address class size, class composition, and staffing levels. 12 years teachers have fought. 12 years we have worked hard to defend our rights, our working conditions, and our students' learning conditions. And once again, this government, led by Christy Clark, is determined to provoke, manipulate, and drive BC's school system into chaos for their own political needs. Christy Clark, through Minister Fassbender and the lead negotiator, is once again trying to strip teachers of our rights to negotiate our working conditions. It's unfair, it's unreasonable, and needlessly confrontational. It flies in the face of Christy Clark's commitment to a decade of labor peace and her family's first agenda. It's contemptuous. But the government's actions don't stop there. Since the fall, when the government's appointee took over negotiations, there's been several concessions demands tabled. Everything from school calendar setting, harassment, sick leave, preparation time, and more have all been target of concessions. Since the government's appointee took over, there's not been one single item that we can agree to. 10 years or 1 year. There's no incentive. There's nothing on the table from government right now that we could recommend to our teachers. In this round, teachers have asked for the restoration of smaller classes, better class composition, and more one-on-one time for students to work with specialist teachers. We originally sought to improve our working conditions over a period of 3 years, knowing that, yes, there are some fiscal challenges. However, after the court win, we asserted that our 2002 language was restored, just as Justice Griffin ordered. We have been seeking improvements in preparation time to ensure that teachers have the time they need to prepare lessons, communicate with parents, and review individual education plans. We've also been seeking improvements in working conditions and benefits for our new members who are working as teachers teaching on call. Part of that includes shortening the salary grid so our new and young teachers, many of them who go years without consistent employment, get a better start in the profession. And yes, we're also looking for a fair and reasonable salary increase. BC teachers have fallen far behind their colleagues across Canada, and just like many other British Columbians, are struggling to meet the rising cost of living. That's why we ask government to consider a fair wage increase that dealt with the rising cost of living, provided a reasonable market adjustment, and acknowledged the increases that other public sector workers have negotiated over the last 2 years. We have not put a specific percentage increase on the table. What government and BCPC's appointed negotiator came back with was unreasonable, unfair, and disjointed. Despite most other public sector workers receiving increases in the range of 3.5 to 4% over 2 years as part of the Cooperative Gains mandate, this government has directed BCPC to pursue a totally different agenda with teachers. After 2 years of legislated zeros, the employer tabled 0.5% on ratification. That 0.5% is not retroactive, which means teachers are likely to face another full year or very close to it without an increase. The second year of the government's proposal is another zero, no increase for the 2014-15 school year. As a result, teachers are possibly staring down 4 straight years of zero. Absolutely no salary increase for 4 years is completely unreasonable and inconsistent with what government has offered other workers. The rest of the 10-year proposal features the current mandate pattern for 5 years and then 4 more years of indexing, which Premier Clark first described in her white paper. The indexing is vague, and even BCPC's negotiating team was a bit confused on how it would work. But as I mentioned before, teachers will not accept a 10-year term. It's not realistic. Teachers already rejected it with a 96% vote, and no other group of workers in BC is being asked to consider anything like it. Other demands that have been tabled should also be dropped. 2 more years of zero, the significant concession demands, and the attempt to restrip class size and composition mere weeks after the BC Supreme Court's scathing judgment against Christy Clark's government. Based on what this government has tabled, we cannot possibly understand how the Premier can say she is interested in labor peace. These are not the proposals of a Premier, Education Minister, or employer interested in stability. And therefore, we must put pressure on the table. It's been over a year, and the parties have been driven further apart since the government dismissed the BCPC board and a new negotiator took over. Teachers want a negotiated settlement. As president of the BCTF, I want a negotiated settlement. The government should want one too. It's time they showed some movement and some respect. Minister Fassbender says it's all about content, and I agree. But so far, there is no content. Bargaining, like I said before, is about compromise, and it's about moving forward and not backward. For teachers, our only recourse in response to the unfair and unreasonable proposals at this point of time is to apply pressure through a strike vote. The strike vote will take place on March 4th, 5th, and 6th, and we will announce the results on the evening of March 6th. Such a vote, however, does not mean imminent school closures. We will consider all our job action and timing very, very carefully. We want a negotiated deal at the table. That is our goal, and we will continue to work hard to get that negotiated deal at the table, and hopefully without any action. Once the strike vote is taken, BCTF has 90 days to activate it with some sort of job action. That job action, if needed, will occur in stages, but any initial action will not include immediate school closures or disruptions for our students, nor will it have our teachers stop doing extracurricular activities, and it will not affect report cards or communication with parents. Any further escalation of job action will depend on progress at the negotiation table. Teachers, we've been more than patient. We've worked hard in this round to create a sense of calm around bargaining and create a space for government to negotiate in good faith and out of the public spotlight. However, this government seems incapable or unwilling to negotiate fairly with teachers. They seem bent on concessions, freezing wages, and ignoring the Supreme Court of British Columbia. Teachers do not take job action lightly. We care deeply about our schools, about our students, and about our communities. But we cannot sit back and let Christy Clark and her government talk about labor peace in public while trying once again to provoke teachers behind closed doors. We will do everything we can to secure a fair deal for teachers and better supports for our students at the bargaining table. I want my optimism restored. Thank you.
Do you think this is the government's strategy to try to provoke strike action again?
Well, that seems to be government's history, especially what we found out through the Supreme Court of BC. I'm still a positive person, and I'm hoping that's not their strategy, but when we take a look at what's happening at the bargaining table and what they've proposed, it's hard for someone not to think that.
I mean, the government did, the court ruling did say the government attempted to provoke a strike for their own political gains. So if teachers do decide to strike, wouldn't that be playing into their hands?
Some people would think that, but we live in a democracy, and we have rights, and one of the rights we have in terms is collective bargaining. And when you've been at a bargaining table now for a year and trying to do everything you can to get a negotiated deal, and also giving space to government, because we know that the employer changed, different people at the table, they needed to get their act together, and we've given them that time. But at some point of time, you need to apply some pressure. And we can't be afraid to apply that pressure through a strike vote because of past government actions and past government history.
How likely do you think it is that the strike vote will pass?
Very, very likely. Absolutely. Like I said, we didn't take this decision lightly. We've taken a while to come to this decision. We wanted to give the bargaining table the time and space it needed. We wanted to give the employer and the government the time and space they needed, and they haven't responded. And so we have to exercise one of the rights that we have available to us.
What's your message to parents who are worried that here we go again, their students will be disrupted, especially coming to the end of the year, graduating students, etc.?
Well, we're hoping that the pressure of a strike vote will be enough for government to get serious at the bargaining table, and that they will come with reasonable proposals at the bargaining table, that they will withdraw the concessions that they have at the table, and they will also withdraw the zeros, and come to the table and negotiate that fair deal for our teachers and better supports for our students. And part of our bargaining, is it about us? Yes, but it's also about students, because that's who we are as teachers. That's why we come into the profession, to work with our students, to make a difference. And when we ask for class sizes, class composition guarantees, and minimum levels of specialist teacher support in our schools, it's all about so we can best meet the needs of all our students, and that we have the resources necessary. And those students that need that extra support, that they have that extra support available to them, like they used to have. If they needed a teacher counselor, if they needed a learning assistance teacher, a special education resource teacher to work with them, we had those specialist teachers. But we do not have the same amount now.
How likely is this to happen when you've got this appeal pending in the court? It looks like this will all get played out at the end of the day in court. So how can there be any sort of settlement agreement or with this looming?
Yes, government has gone to court to appeal. We are hoping that after breaking a law twice now, that this government would have tried everything in their power to make the situation right and to provide the necessary funding to school districts to put back into effect smaller class sizes for our students and more specialist support so they can get that important one-on-one time. We've been at this in terms of the court piece now for 12 years, and this government has violated the Charter rights, the Constitution twice. And Justice Griffin has ordered the provisions that were stripped illegally restored in our collective agreement. And, that's the basis for us. And it's about our working conditions, and it's about our student learning conditions. And that's so important to us.
What does this mean for a young person who's thinking about getting into the teaching profession when they see there seems to be such vitriol coming from the provincial government?
I mean, I'm sure students probably have to, give pause in terms of wanting to become a teacher, knowing the history of this government and the lack of respect that this government has given teachers and the lack of funding and the support that we need. But teaching is, I think, still the greatest profession. And despite the history in terms of the disrespect shown by government, teachers still see teaching as an important profession because they want to work with students. But I'm sure they definitely give that a thought before entering into the profession.
You mentioned you're looking for a reasonable wage increase. So how much are you expecting? Like out of public sector, 3%? Are you expected from the bargaining table?
Well, we haven't put a number at the bargaining table yet, and we will, because what we wanted to do was have the dialogue. We wanted to have the dialogue about what would be a reasonable offer. We've fallen behind our colleagues across Canada, and so our proposal reflects that what's important for us is keeping up with the cost of living, and that there be a recognition that we've fallen way behind our colleagues across Canada. And that's the discussion that we want to have, and the increase that gets put on the table will reflect that.
When was your next negotiation scheduled with the government?
We're back at the table on the 4th of March, and we'll be bargaining on the 4th, 5th, 6th, and 7th, and then the following week we're at the table on the 11th and 12th.
And despite the strike vote, you'll continue meeting with the government?
Oh, absolutely. The strike vote intention is to put the pressure on the bargaining table, but we'll be at the bargaining table trying to reach a fair deal for teachers and better supports for our students. And we're encouraging government to provide the necessary funding to make that happen.
When will be the strike vote?
The strike vote will be taking place on the 4th, 5th, and 6th of March.
Oh, so it's the same date of the negotiation?
The first day of our vote will be the first day we're back at the table. And being at the bargaining table is important for us because that's where the deal has to happen.
And the results will be out?
And the results will be out on the evening of the 6th, later on in the evening, yes. Okay. Thank you very much.